Committee and a hearing on stopping the financing of terrorism yesterday. What did they ask you, and what did you tell them?
Well, it was an opportunity for me on behalf of Secretary O'Neill and the Bush administration to give the members of the committee an update, if you will, a summary of the progress that we've made in the war against terror, and specifically our efforts to starve the terrorists of funds.
And how much money has been blocked globally?
We have blocked to date $113 million. I think this is significant. First of all, it's 250 individuals and entities that have been designated as terrorist financiers or supporters of terrorism. And we have blocked $113 million. That means that we have prevented $113 million from going to the hands of terrorists to underwrite and finance acts of terrorism.
We're taking your calls and questions and comments for Jimmy Gurule, Treasury Department Undersecretary for Enforcement. Democrats, you can call us at 202-585-3881. Republicans, 202-585-3880, and all others, 202-585-3882. You can also send us your emails at journal@c-span.org. Give us some examples of traditional and non-traditional ways that the Treasury Department is using to block the funding of terrorism.
Well, traditional ways would include the financial system, specifically banks. And we've been working very closely with the private sector, the financial sector, to implement ways to make it more difficult for terrorists to move money globally through the financial system. We have worked very closely with the financial sector to implement the new USA Patriot Act. There are several very important provisions that require banks to implement new provisions, procedures, anti-money laundering programs to make it more difficult for terrorists to use banks. Non-traditional means, there are quite a number. They're quite diverse. We've seen, for example, that terrorists use charities to raise money and to move money globally. Now, again, that's not to suggest that all charities are corrupt, because certainly they're not. And we're not engaged in a war against Islamic charities or charities more generally, but certainly we're engaged in a war against corrupt charities.
What kind of activities would you see in a charity that would be a signal to you that perhaps they are funding terrorists?
Well, we're very interested, of course, in where the money is going. And in some cases, our intelligence has disclosed that money is going to Hamas, and not simply to support schools and orphanages, but to purchase weapons and to finance terror camps.
Good morning, Liberty, Texas, on the Republican line.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today?
Just fine.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, you know, $113 million compared to the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars that countries like Saudi Arabia have accumulated and invested worldwide over the last several decades, relatively speaking, is a very paltry sum. You know, I'm glad to see that you're making a symbolic effort to track down some of this money, but it's really sad because this so-called terrorist money is a lot like the drug money, that nobody is doing anything about the billions of dollars that's been accumulated through selling illegal drugs, and by opening up overseas branches for American companies, we've created conduits for this kind of dirty money to be invested in the American economy. And instead of making a real effort at cleaning up this black market economy that's really driving things like the stock market, you're doing this. And I know that we need to do something, and people want government to make, you know, some kind of attempt at attacking what I guess you would call a symptom of this dirty world economy.
Well, let me comment first that the U.S. government's strategy is a very comprehensive strategy. And the public designations, the designation of individuals as terrorist financiers, and the blocking of accounts is only one component of that strategy. First, it's an international strategy, and we're working very closely with our allies in shutting off channels, networks, and dismantling networks that are being used to move money globally. So we don't want to focus simply on the dollars. We don't want to focus simply on the numbers. In one particular case, we took action internationally with our international partners to dismantle a Hawala network called Al-Barakat. And while we blocked in the United States just a little over $1 million of funds, we dismantled the network, and this was a network that was moving as much as $20 million a year. And so now we shut off that pipeline or that channel for moving funds. So I think it's important that the caller understand that we're not simply focusing on dollars blocked, but dismantling terrorist networks, and at the same time strengthening financial regulatory systems, not only in the United States but internationally with foreign governments. Again, so it's more difficult for these terrorists to move money through foreign banks.
Sandy, Utah, on the Democrats' line. Go ahead.
Yes, C-SPAN is sort of expanded, had 3 issues on there. I wanted to talk on all issue, but this last one is a little bit innocuous in a way, is that, so I'm going to wrap all 3 of them. If they could take this money that they got from blocking the terrorist money, and we can pay our surtax, please, on the Homeland Security, and then they can help pay for police cars, maybe they can put that money to use. A legitimate question is, do you know how much money they have available to them? And how do you come about that knowledge? Thank you.
That's an excellent question. It's very difficult to define with any precision, how much money is available, if you will, to finance acts of terror. It's certainly fair to say that it's a substantial amount of money. There are certainly sufficient funds available out there to underwrite future acts of terrorism. That's why our strategy, the Bush administration strategy, is a long-term strategy. We understand, and the President has repeated this point, this is a war. It's an unconventional war. It's a war that we're not going to win in weeks or months or even years. I mean, we're going to be at this effort for a long time, and we're committed to do so.
East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, on the Republican line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. If you could tell me, sir, that all the actions taken by your committees there to cut funding to terrorists was just doing just that, primarily cutting funds to terrorism, I would be jumping up and down for joy. But, sir, what we seem to lose focus on whenever we approach foreign policy is the poor people in other nations that we seem to affect. How is it going to be perceived by the poorer people that receive these charities? That I'm almost certain, sir, that can you assure me 100% that we're not affecting legitimate charities that are really going out and outreach for people who really need these monies in these countries in the Mideast or whatever, and that they won't be harmed by this financial How will it be perceived by these people? Just another act by America, another aggression by America against poor people, especially Arabs and Muslims.
As I've stated, this is not a war against charity. America is a very charitable nation. We certainly encourage individuals, private donors to support legitimate humanitarian causes. We want to encourage that, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. At the same time, we want to make sure that charities are not being used, being abused, being corrupted by terrorists for evil purposes. One of the ways that we have been working with the Arab American community to ensure that the money that they're donating, and especially intending to go to legitimate causes, is in fact going to support hospitals and schools and orphanages, is that we've come up with a set of voluntary best practices, ways in which donors can engage in due diligence to make sure that the money that they're donating is going to a good cause. And so we're working with the Arab American community. We've come up with these voluntary best practices, due diligence principles, if you will, and we think that this is one way that we can assist donors that want to do the right thing, that are attempting to support humanitarian efforts. Having said that, if we have a charity that's doing both, supporting humanitarian efforts and supporting terror, that cannot be tolerated, and it will not be tolerated in the United States. We're not going to allow charities to be used as a cover, to finance the killing of innocent people.
What's meant by the term freezing funds?
Freezing funds means that the owner of the money or the account is denied access to that money. So it hasn't been forfeited to the United States, but it's really a denial of access to those funds by the account holder. He cannot withdraw the funds, he cannot transfer the funds to a third party or to anyone else.
Would the funds continue to draw interest if they were in such a...
They would continue to draw interest, that's correct.
Next, we go to Erie, Pennsylvania. Hello? Augusta, Georgia?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
I just have a question for the Undersecretary, and it's pretty much regarding to the program. How does the Bush program on the anti-terrorism differs from the McCarthyism that we saw in the past? Is this not just a way of identifying people, assets as being part of a terrorist organization and just capturing, or as you mentioned earlier, freezing those assets? Is that just another way of creating a scare, a program in America to just seize people's personal property?
One of the interesting developments over the last year with respect to our blocking actions is that there have been 3 federal lawsuits that have been filed, challenging the constitutionality of the blocking actions and the freezing of funds. And in each of those 3 federal court cases, the federal judge upheld the constitutionality of the freezing and the blocking as being consistent with constitutional principles, consistent with due process. And so I'm very encouraged with respect to the legality of our action. And of course, this is very important because when we take blocking action here in the United States, it does a little good if these individuals are able to move money through foreign bank accounts. So it's imperative that the international community act shoulder to shoulder with the United States government in jointly blocking accounts internationally. And so this is very encouraging so that we can go to our international allies and say, look, this conduct, this act of blocking funds has been upheld now in 3 different federal courts. It's legal, it's constitutional, it adheres to important due process principles, and therefore they should be encouraged by that when we ask them to take action in their countries.
Speaking of going to the Allies, last month you went to Europe. Who did you see and what did you talk about?
This was a very important trip. I visited 5 countries in 5 days. 3 of those countries represent major international financial centers. I visited Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein. I also visited Denmark and Sweden. The reason for visiting the financial centers was in large part to meet with the members of the financial sector, the bankers associations, to discuss ways in which we can enhance our partnership with the financial sector. Because really it's the bankers that are on the front lines, if you will, in the war against terrorist financing. We need them to identify suspicious financial transactions, report that information to their financial intelligence units and to foreign law enforcement authorities.
Our next call comes from Alexandria, Virginia, on the Republican line. Go ahead.
Yes. Thanks for taking my call. You are saying that, this is not war against the charity, okay? It is war against the terrorist organization. I agree with that. But when you send a carve-up operation overseas to, destroy other leaders and other government all around the world, what do you call that kind of organization? It's not terrorism organization?
Well, let me just comment again. As I stated, this is not a war against any particular religion or any particular ethnic group. I mean, the president has stated that we are at war against terrorism, against terrorist organizations that threaten freedom and democracy, against terrorist organizations that kill innocent civilians for a political purpose. And one important way that we can combat that evil and that terror is to go after the funds, to go after the money that is needed to underwrite and finance acts of terror. And with respect to the charities, this is very problematic. We took action back in December of last year to block the funds of the Holy Land Foundation. This is the largest fundraiser for Hamas. And so our actions have not simply been limited to Al-Qaeda. Certainly Al-Qaeda is our top priority, the administration's top priority, but we're also taking steps against other terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, ETA, the IRA, the FARC as well.
Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, on the Democrats' line. Go ahead.
In my opinion, we can't win this war unless America wises up and the world wises up to the fact that it's impossible to win. I think several of our cities in the next few years are going to be nuked out because we can't stop them. It's totally impossible without doing something extremely radical that society is not willing to do. I mean, we need to move the Jews, in my opinion, completely out of that area. Those that aren't willing to leave, let them stay there. And then let the entire world know that the next time anybody messes with any area other than the Jews, let them take care of themselves, all the Israelis, and let the world know that we're not going to back them anymore. We're not going to sell them any weapons anymore. Then if Hamas continues to mess with us and the rest of the world, get Russia and China's help or their permission to go ahead and start setting up processing plants around the world.
Well, I would disagree with the caller's statement that this is a war that we cannot win. The president believes, and the Bush administration believes, that we can win this war. And the president has provided this country with very strong leadership in the war against terrorism. And we've seen that demonstrated most recently with the passage of the Homeland Security bill. Through the president's strong leadership, we will soon have a new Department of Homeland Security. Both the House and the Senate have passed this legislation. This will create a new agency of 170,000 people that will be dedicated principally to enhancing security at our borders, at our airports, that will ensure better coordination amongst federal law enforcement agencies, better information sharing. I think that this new department will go a long ways to enhancing security and making America a safer place and making it much more difficult for terrorists to enter into our country and commit acts of terror.
Will your branch of the Treasury Department stay under Treasury, or will you move to Homeland Security?
There are several of the federal agencies that I supervise that will be transferred to the new department. The United States Customs Service will be transferring, as will the Secret Service. And we'll be seeing the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms not actually going to the new Department of Homeland Security, but going to the Department of Justice. And they'll be working even more closely with the FBI.
Salisbury, Maryland, you're next on the Republican line. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Sir, do you have any knowledge that money contributed to the Red Crescent might be funneled to terrorist organizations? You're familiar with the Red Crescent and who they are?
Well, I'm familiar with the name, but I certainly will not comment on what we know, meaning the U.S. government, what our intelligence has disclosed with respect to any particular individual or organization that we believed is linked to terror. I will say this, though, that we are following the money trail wherever it leads, in a very aggressive way. We are pursuing all credible evidence with respect to financing of terror, and we're working very closely, not simply with federal law enforcement agencies, but with our foreign counterparts, foreign law enforcement agencies as well. This is a global effort.
Grand Rapids on the Republican line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. I'd like to compliment. America doesn't realize what a evil and dangerous enemy we have over there. They're willing to do anything to get to us. I agree with the Homeland Security. We're going to have to give up some of our freedoms right now to get these guys. They're willing to do any kind of deception and sneak into this country and use any kind of lies to get to us. And the gentleman that commented on Israel, us not backing them, we stopped backing Israel. They won. They beat us. That's what they won, and they're going to be just like the Nazis, and they're going to take out the Jews, then they're going to be after the Christians. 90% of all mosques in this country are funding terrorism in one way or another. And unfortunately, the Islamic faith is our enemy. And as soon as America wakes up and sees that, we are in trouble.
The point that I would make here again is that this is not a war against Islam. And Islam is a great religion. The president has acknowledged that fact. This is the month of Ramadan, and I send my best wishes to those that are praying, fasting during this most holy month. At the same time, however, there are some elements, some people that would like to use that religion and convert it in a way that would threaten the safety of America. Extremists, if you will, and those terrorists, those that threaten and have as their mandate or goal the destruction of America, the killing of Americans. Those people are our enemies. Those are the people that we're going after. We're doing it with laser precision. We're using the full might of the U.S. military, the full might of our intelligence agencies and federal law enforcement resources, and we will win this war.
On the Democrats' line, New York City, your question for Undersecretary Jimmy Gurule.
Yes, good morning, Undersecretary. My name is Preston Pete. I'm an editor-at-large at High Times Magazine and the editor of DrugWar.com. I've been seeing a lot of commercials lately on television equating marijuana sales to funding of terrorism. And knowing a lot of people who grow and use marijuana, I can't say any of them are supporting terrorism. I'd like to ask a question about the United States having given people like Vladimir Montesinos, who sold machine guns to the FARC guerrillas, $10 million to work for the CIA, and things like giving the Taliban $43 million in humanitarian aid in 2001, as well as $70 million to Afghan warlords now growing poppies all over their country. How is that not supporting terrorism or giving all this money away to foreign countries and despots and terrorist armies? Are we going after the U.S. politicians who have been okaying all this funding around the world? Thank you.
I would agree with one point in your statement, and that is that the drug trafficking is one means, one way to that terrorists raise money to support terrorist activity. We certainly know that is the case with the FARC in Colombia, and it is the principal means by which they raise money. And we've been working, and to that end, we've been working very closely with the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, and sharing information with that agency to, again, cut off the pipeline of money that is being raised from the sale of illicit drugs.
Terre Haute, Indiana, on the Republican line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, my question is for Mr. Secretary. It was speculated before 9/11 that large profits were taken from Wall Street by Al-Qaeda operatives under pseudos. Is that being looked at, and can anything be done to track those down?
There was some concern that might have been the case. It was investigated by the SEC, and it turned out that there was no evidence to conclude that was the case. So it has been investigated, and again, it's been determined that there was no merit to those concerns and allegations.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
Thomas Culligan, Senior Vice President for Raytheon, is our guest when we come back.
This weekend on C-SPAN 2, Book TV live from the Miami Book Fair International.